I had spent some of my weekends working as a cleaning lady in my own office from time to time for over 20 years. I began doing it not long after I started my company. No matter where the office was located, I always found time to go in and clean it up when no one was around. My company's office is currently situated in a building that the company owns. The office occupies a full floor of that 4-story building. I had built up the corporation into a formidable enterprise. We did well over the years, and I had enough money stashed away to never have to work another day again in my life. Still, I went to work every day and played out my role as the CEO and president of the company more out of habit than desire. However, on the weekends I got to do the job that I wanted to do. That's when I could sneak in there and play the part one wanted to play. I was never happier than I was when I was cleaning my office. I would go there and put on one of my uniforms. I had 3 of them. One was blue, another gray, and another black. They were all the same, just simple dresses with white collars that I covered with aprons as I worked. It was always the same. I would go to my office with my pantyhose discreetly hidden beneath a pair of pants. When I would get there, I would get changed into my uniform in my private executive's office. After that, I would put on a little makeup and put my hair up into a high ponytail. I had had shoulder-length hair since I started the company. I wore it around the office in a low ponytail. I was the only guy in the office with long hair, but since I was the boss, no one dared to say anything about it. I loved the length of my hair. It was the one daily, outward reminder to myself of my feminine desires that so frequently gnawed at me from within. There were other reminders though. I frequently wore feminine undergarments and everyone in the office thought I was gay. That was partly by design though. I knew that there were rumors about my sexuality, so I came out in the early 1990s. After that I lived openly as homosexual male. Everyone accepted my claim, but I knew it was a lie. I had spent my entire life only attracted to women. However, I knew that my choice of lifestyle made attracting a woman difficult. Given my frequent embrace of my feminine desires, I had easily noticeable mannerisms that were effeminate. Even the girls that I had dated over the years that looked past my effeminate acts would invariably leave me once they discovered my secret stash of women's clothing. I was constantly in fear that one of those girls would eventually talk, so I gave up serious relationships after a while. I found that it was simply easier to live openly as a gay man even though I was straight. It opened up new opportunities for me. I began to keep my body hairless. When I told those who inquired about my suddenly smooth arms that I did it to get an even tan, they just assumed I was telling them the truth. I took full advantage of indulging my girlish desires in the ways that homosexual men can and straights cannot for fear of being labeled as gay. My life got better after I came out. I found that I could gossip with the girls and talk about fashion with them. My female employees really did not seem at all bothered by my apparent sexuality except for some of the older ones. The men were a little more put off by it, but that was to be expected given the male ego and all. Some of them quit as the years passed, and I was eventually left with a staff of employees that were comfortable with my self-proclaimed homosexuality. The only real drawback to my situation was the occasional attempts of my employees to fix me up with their gay friends. It wasn't that bad of a drawback, however. I easily dealt with it and told them I wasn't looking at the moment. Some of my employees eventually assumed that I had a secret lover that I didn't talk about. I was never bothered by any of the speculation, so I never corrected them. That was my life until one fateful Saturday. I went down to the office that day and did as I had done hundreds of times before. I dressed in my maid's uniform, put on a little makeup, fixed up my hair and started to clean my office. I was cleaning one of my subordinates' desks when I heard a jiggling on the handle of the office door. I could hear someone trying to open the lock. I scurried across the floor and headed for the women's restroom, which was the one closest to where I had been working. I locked the door behind me as I thought the place was being robbed. I went to call the police, but I reached down and remembered how I was dressed. I didn't have any pockets on my uniform other than the small ones in my apron. I put my yellow, latex glove-covered hand over my mouth as I realized that I didn't have my cell phone on me. I had left it on my desk with my male clothing. I looked around the bathroom in search of a way out. I had never actually entered the women's room even though I had unobjectionable access to it on the weekends. I must admit that I found it a little strange to be in the ladies' room for the first time. The walls were pink, a detail that I was completely unaware of despite the fact that the men's room was correspondingly painted blue. It made sense, but I never ventured to even think about the ladies' room walls. I looked up at a window, but I was trying to not make a sound. I didn't dare make a move for it. I figured that might give away my location to the robbers. I was hoping that they would just see that the room was a ladies' room and pass it by without inquiry. Then, suddenly, I heard a voice. It was Lily Black's. She was my secretary and had one of only 2 keys to the office besides my own. The other key holder was my vice president, Brian. I had given her the key so that she could open the office if Brian or I were unable to. I never thought she would stop by outside of work hours. I heard Lily say to some woman I was unfamiliar with that the bathroom was just over there. I started to shake. I knew that I needed to get out of there. Desperate for a way out, I jumped up on the toilet. I decided then to climb out the window even though the office was on the 2nd floor. I figured in my haste that it wasn't that far of a drop. I reached for the window, but I found that it did not open. In retrospect, that was probably a good thing because if the window did, I almost certainly would have left the office that day in ambulance with 2 broken legs while still dressed en femme for all the doctors and passers-by to see. Resigned to suffering a great humiliation, I climbed down and tried to keep quiet. I heard footsteps approaching the door. Then I saw the handle turn and jiggle. "It's locked," I heard the unknown woman say. "Locked?" Lily asked. The woman affirmed her first statement. Then Lily said, "Oh, wait. I think I saw Mr. Sayers' car in the parking lot." "Mr. Sayers? Why would a guy be in the girls' bathroom?" the unknown woman asked. "Beats me, men are weird," Lily replied. I grimaced as I heard the knock upon the door. "Mr. Sayers, are you in there?" I heard Lily ask. I said nothing, hoping that they would just leave the office or at least use the men's room instead. My hopes were quickly squashed. Lily said, "The cleaning girl must have locked it by accident. Hold on, there's a key to it in my desk." I started to shake. I knew that I was about to be found out. Still, I had held out hope that she somehow misplaced the key, and I would be relieved from the horror that would surely befall me. I listened closely through the door and heard Lily say, "Oh, here it is." I heard footsteps approaching the door. There was no way out. There was also only one stall, so I knew I could not hide in there. I knew that I was either going to open the door or Lily was going to do it for me. I took a deep breath and stared at the ceiling as I turned the doorknob. I heard the click of the door unlocking. It echoed inside my head. I heard Lily say, "Oh, I guess he was in there," as I drew the door open. Lily froze as she saw me. She stared down at my body with a shocked look upon her face. She quickly collected herself and said, "Oh, it's you, Fran. Danielle, this is our cleaning lady, Fran." I smiled politely at Danielle and got out of her way. She went into the bathroom and closed the door behind her, leaving Lily and I alone. A smirk appeared on Lily's face as she asked, "So this is how you spend your weekends, Mr. Sayers?" I blushed and said, "Please keep that down." I continued to blush as I waited for her to respond. I'm not sure if I blushed because of my humiliation or the fact that my humiliation was turning me on. "Oh, yes. Sorry, but I have to ask, Mr. Sayers. Why are you dressed like that?" she asked in a hushed tone. Feeling no need to lie, given that the truth was not any more humiliating than what she had already seen, I answered, "I just enjoy it is all. I've been doing it for years." I have had this urge to dress up like a girl and clean since I was a teenager. Even when I was a kid, I had the urge to dress, but I never told anyone about this, Lily. Lily nodded as she replied, I understand, Mr. Sayers. This isn't something that would be easy to discuss. There are a lot of judgmental people out there who would really look down on this. I hastily responded, that's so true, Lily. That's why I have to ask to keep this to yourself. Can you promise me that? Lily nodded and answered, of course, Mr. Sayers. I would never tell anyone about this unless you told them first. I can keep a secret. I was unconvinced by her response. There was just something in her voice that told me that word of my little weekend escapades would be spreading across the office on Monday. I went to respond, but our conversation came to an abrupt end as we heard Danielle opening the bathroom door. She came out and walked over to us. Lily smiled and asked, all set? Danielle said she was and thanked Lily for letting her use the bathroom. It was my treat, Lily replied as her eyes glanced over at me. She had started out of the office with Danielle when she turned and said, oh, Fran, make sure you give my desk an extra special clean. I want it to smell lemony fresh when I get to work on Monday. I nodded and said, of course, Lily. She then left the building with her friend. I was left alone with my heart still racing and wondering if I should comply with Lily's demand. I wasn't sure if she was serious. I decided to comply because I figured it might make her less likely to tell everyone about my weekend activity that she stumbled upon. I walked over to her desk and gave it a very thorough dusting. I picked up her monitor and all the papers and pictures on her desk and cleaned beneath them. I made sure that the desk practically reeked of the scented cleaner. After I finished, I hurried into my office and unzipped my dress. I pulled off shoes and dress and put on my bulky shirt that had my padded brassiere and put my pants on over my pantyhose. I then slid my feet into my sneakers and headed out of the office with my dress and cleaning sneakers hidden in the brown paper bag I had carried them into the office in. I jogged to my car and drove home where I was left to ponder what would happen when I saw Lily on Monday. I figured then that my life as I knew it was over. When Monday came, I was apprehensive about what would happen in the office. I wondered if Lily would exploit her advantage or would keep her promise to me. I went to the office early that day and sat behind my desk as I waited for Lily and the others to arrive. I tried to lessen my anxiety by fidgeting with my pen as I looked at my computer screen as I searched for places to save the company money. The company wasn't in any danger of insolvency. We had ample amounts of money coming in, but they were still down significantly from 2 years earlier. I was looking for ways to get us back up to that previous level of profitability. I had even sent a memo around the office telling my employees to come up with money-saving solutions. As I peered out my office window, I saw Lily pull into the parking lot. My foot started to tap wildly on the floor as I watched her get out of the car. She sauntered up to the building dressed in a light gray, knee-length skirt suit like she had thousands of times before. Nothing in her behavior seemed out of the ordinary. I saw her disappear from my view as she got near the building's front door. I then turned away from the window and waited for her to enter the office. I was dying to see how she would use the advantage she stumbled upon against me. My executive's office had a window that looked out onto the office common area where most of my employees worked. I saw Lily walk into that area. I held my breath as I waited for her to make some breathless announcement or hurry over to the girls for some gossip. However, when Lily came in, she did nothing like that. She just said hello to people and sat at her desk as she got started with her morning work. I didn't hear her say a word about what she caught me doing. About a half hour after she arrived, she stood up and knocked on my door. I nervously coughed and said that she could enter. Lily smiled down at me as she approached my desk with her hands clasped in front of her. She asked if she could get me coffee or had any special instructions for. I was surprised by the fact that she still wasn't mentioning what she saw me do on Saturday. I instantly wondered what she was up to as I told her to get me a cup of coffee. She complied like she always did. As she re-entered the office, I decided to breach the subject of my cross-dressing. I told her to close the office door and said, "Lily, we need to talk." She put the cup down on my desk and asked, "Can I take a seat?" I nodded and asked, "How are we going to deal with what you saw?" Lily crossed her legs, leaned back in her seat and replied, "I was just going to keep it to myself, like I told you on Saturday." I wondered what kind of game she was playing, so I replied, "Is that really what you're going to do?" "Yes," Lily replied slowly as she squinted at me. "There's nothing else you have to say?" I inquired. Lily smiled. I was sure that I was about to hear her demands, but she instead answered, "I did want to talk to you about one thing, sir." "Really, what?" I asked, feigning ignorance. Lily put her hands over her crossed, stocking-covered knees as she replied, "I have a way for the company to save money." That was not the response I was anticipating, but I had to go with it. I asked, "What's your idea?" Lily leaned forwards and said, "I was thinking that maybe you could take up cleaning the office after hours." I sunk in my chair as I realized how Lily was going to play her hand. I figured that if I didn't agree, she would tell everyone in the office what she had seen. Still, as much as the idea of officially working as the company cleaning lady turned me on in the odd way it had most of my life, I decided I would be best served trying to weasel out of doing it. I looked Lily in the eyes and responded, "I can't do that, Lily. I can't risk Brian coming in here like you did and catching me." "Brian never comes in here after hours," Lily retorted. I knew she was right, so I went another route. "That's true, but there's other things." "Such as?" Lily interjected. I continued and replied, "Well, how well do you think I can do the job? I'm not a trained cleaning lady, after all." Lily looked around at the cleanly room we were sitting in. The cleanliness was all my own doing. We both knew that now. The impeccable cleaning job around me answered my own question. I was as skilled as the best cleaning lady because of my decades of practice dating to when I was 12. Lily leaned towards me and said, "We both know you're as good as any girl you bring in here." A regrettable smile for her praise came upon my face. I caught myself and said, "The cleaning lady doesn't just do this office. She does the common areas in the building too." "So?" "Well, other people have keys to the building. They could come in after hours and see me cleaning the stairs, halls and such." "What's your point, Mr. Sayers? You always told me that you made sure that none of your tenants know you by face because you don't want to deal with them." "Well, that's true, Lily, but they would know that I was a cross-dressing cleaning lady. Don't you realize how embarrassing that would be for me?" "I suppose that could happen, but why should you let that stop you from doing what you love?" "Love?" "Yes, love. You clearly love cleaning. Why else would you come to the office and clean it on your free time in a lady's uniform?" I tried to come up with a rational explanation. That was a fruitless endeavor. I figured at that moment I wasn't going to talk my way out of it. If Lily wanted me to do it, I assumed I had no choice. I was sure my secret would come out if I didn't go along with her suggestion. I took a deep breath and said, "You're right, Lily. Call the agency and give them notice that we were going to end our contract with them as soon as possible." Lily smiled and said, "Very good, Mr. Sayers." I cursed my perversions as Lily stood up and walked out of my office to make the call. Lily was able to cancel my company's agreement with cleaning agency after giving them 2 weeks' notice of the impending termination. When she told me that she was able to cancel it, it took all I had to even acknowledge her. I was just filled with such a sense of dread for what I knew was coming. As the day I was to start my new duties grew near, I got more and more nervous about it. It started to keep me up at night. I knew that my chances of exposure were slim, but slim is still considerably more than non-existent in a mind that's particularly prone to worrying and fearing the worst. Even the slight chance of being caught parading around as a cleaning lady in my own office was enough to put the fear of God into me. I desperately wanted to get out of it somehow, but I knew that such hopes were in vain. There was nothing that was going to keep me from cleaning my office on a nightly basis. I was certain that my loss of position was unavoidable. At the same time, though, a part of me wasn't really all that opposed to what I was going to be doing. I wanted to do the job. I loved even thinking about doing it. Even the idea of being caught doing it aroused me. However, I knew all of those urges were wrong in the eyes of most men and women. Despite my excitement over my future work, my more sensible fears kept me from really enjoying the thought of working full-time as the company cleaning lady. When the starting date came, I felt downright queasy. Lily noticed and tried to get me to buck up. She stayed after work to help me appraise what I had to do that night. She walked around the office while I dressed in my maid's uniform. It was the same simple blue dress with a white apron that Lily caught me wearing during my weekend cleaning. I kept on the nude pantyhose I had put on beneath my suit that morning. I finished the outfit off with a pair of plain white sneakers before I put on a little makeup and tied my hair back in a higher ponytail to give myself a more feminine look. Lily gawked at me as I came out of my office. I asked, "What's wrong, Lily?" She shook her head and replied, "Nothing. I didn't think you were serious when you said you'd keep dressing like a cleaning lady when you started doing this full-time. I figured you'd just keep on your clothes, but if dressing like that does something for you, keep doing it, I guess." I blushed and asked Lily if she saw anything special that I needed to do. She shook her head and told me that she was taking off for the night. I said goodbye to her and asked, "Lily, could you keep all this to yourself?" As Lily put her hand on the door, she smiled and said, "I keep telling you, Mr. Sayers, I'm not going to tell anyone." I smiled back at her as she opened the door and walked out of the office. As she left, I went about cleaning up the place. I went room by room dragging the office cleaning cart behind me. I emptied the waste paper baskets and gave the desks, tables, and countertops a light dusting. It really wasn't difficult work. Then I went and got the vacuum. It was always among the most arduous tasks because there was so much carpet to vacuum. It required moving chairs out of the way and took a good hour and a half to do the whole office. When I finished, I headed to the bathrooms. I went into them and scrubbed the urinal and toilets. It was not something I had ever done on the weekends at the office. I always kept my cleaning to the work areas. Now, I had no choice but to do them. I entered the ladies' room first and found myself surrounded by the pink walls and the single pink stall as I scrubbed the toilet that my female subordinates used that day. I wondered what they would think if they knew that their boss was on his hands and knees cleaning the bowl they used. They'd probably laugh at me if not outright scorn me for doing it. It was a lowly task that they might consider beneath them, particularly the higher-up women in the company with advanced degrees. I finished cleaning the bathrooms by taking out the trash bags and replacing them before I mopped the floors. That was the task I most dreaded because of its effect on my back. I was tired by the time I stopped having to make that repeated motion that hurt my lower back. It wasn't all bad though. I remember the first time I caught my reflection in the dirty water as I wrung out the mop that night. I had to smile at the sight I saw. In that water, I was Fran the cleaning lady, not Frank Sayers the president and CEO. I was the lowly girl in that water and not the powerful business executive my employees knew. That perked me up a little as I turned my attention to mopping the staircase and cleaning the elevators before I vacuumed the floors of the building's common areas. I finished the building by a little after 10 p.m. I went home that night exhausted. I had a little something to eat and went straight to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I found that I was unusually tired. I knew the reason why, but I figured I'd have to put up with it. I went to work and did just what I did the day before. Lily noticed how tired I was and asked about it. I brushed her off and went about doing what I usually did. As everyone left that night, I ate the dinner I packed for myself and changed back into my uniform. I then went and began performing the same work I had performed the night before. Towards the end of my work, I was cleaning a stain on the rug on first floor hallway when I heard a noise behind me. I turned my head towards the sound and heard a doorknob jiggle. I froze as I waited for the person to show their face. I immediately began to relive the humiliation I felt when Lily caught me. I knew that there was nowhere for me to run to. The front door was the closest escape for me. Even if I reached it before the person saw me, I would likely be in no better of a position. If I left that building, I figured that I would probably be locked out by either the departing worker or robber. I really didn't know if it was an employee at another company working late or an intruder. Either way, if the person caught me running away, I thought that my situation might be worsened. My hands started to shake as I held the rag in my hands and sat upon the heels of my feet. A man exited the first floor office. I felt instantly relieved to recognize him. He was the head of the law firm that was headquartered on that floor. My fears of being tied up or brutalized by an intruder passed, but I still faced the possibility of being exposed as a crossdresser. No man had ever seen me dressed before. While Danielle and Lily hadn't said anything to indicate that I was not passable, I had still never been en femme while in the gaze of a man before. I wondered if he would give me a more scrutinizing look than Lily's friend had. While the man likely had no idea who I was, I'm sure he had seen me around the building. I leaned forward as he approached me. My knees hit the carpet again. I never liked the feeling of the carpet digging into my nylon-covered knees, but it was a necessary part of the job. I grabbed the cleaner and to spray the stain. I scrubbed it into the stain on the rug as the man's footsteps grew closer. I peered up at the man as he walked up next to me. I figured he would say something, but he just continued on towards the front door. He ignored me. I was relieved. He thought that I was nothing more than the cleaning lady as he walked by me. I smiled as I thought to myself, that man didn't think I was worth the time of day. I felt my member enlarging between my legs and poking at the gusset of my pantyhose as I kept thinking about what the man might be thinking as he walked towards the front door of the building. I was excited at the fact that he had walked right past me and not noticed that I was a man. The fact that he didn't even recognize my presence aroused me too. I was so used to the office's respect, but as I toiled in my female guise as the cleaning lady, my tenant felt free to ignore me. Hell, even though that man didn't know who I was, he always said hello to me when I walked past him in a suit. I smiled at the fact that he probably did not deem me worthy of his recognition as I cleaned the rug he walked upon. I couldn't help but find myself excited at the thought of being considered beneath him. I watched him as he unlocked the front door, walked out and locked the door behind him before he headed into the parking lot. I began to wonder if I was really passable as a woman. I didn't give it much thought though as I got my mind refocused on cleaning the stain as best I could. Shortly after the man exited the building, I finished up my night shift. I went home that night at about 10:30. I found that I had slowed down considerably from the day before. I went straight to bed and awoke the next morning feeling exhausted. I went to the office and opened it up. When Lily came into my office that day, she found me asleep on my desk. She woke me and told me that she thought that it would be best if I took the day off and rested up from my nightly custodial shift. I responded, "I can't do that, Lily. My job needs to get done. I've done it when you're away, Mr. Sayers. Don't worry about it. Rest up and come back fresh this evening." I knew that Lily had done parts of my job when I was on business trips and vacation, but she always had me to call when problems arose. I was unsure of how she could handle such a situation with me sound asleep. I was also under the belief that this was just the start of Lily's plan. I knew she was trying to take over the office. I couldn't blame her, any domineering woman would, even if Lily never seemed to be that type. I decided that there was little use in fighting it. I decided to go home to get some rest. The drive home was perilous as I frequently found myself nodding off as I drove. Lucky to have avoided an accident, I entered my home and went to sleep. I returned that night well rested and got my work done quickly. I finished around 9:30. I couldn't believe how quickly I got things done. The next day I got stuck in traffic and got to work a little late. I walked in and found that Lily was sitting in my office and doing my work. I saw Lily sitting at my desk looking every bit the boss I was supposed to be. I walked towards her and admitted, "Lily, I can't keep this up." Lily looked back at me, concerned, and said, "I know, you looked terrible yesterday. What are you planning on doing, Mr. Sayers?" I was surprised to hear that she did not assume that I wouldn't just hire another cleaning agency. I realized then that she was intent on making me do that job no matter how much it affected me. I knew my options then. I would either have to leave my executive's position or risk Lily telling everyone. I was sure that was the position I found myself in. Something that I had often fantasized about was coming true. I decided the safest course of action was to promote Lily and tell everyone I was retiring from the day-to-day operations of the company. I would remain the CEO, but I would no longer be in the office frequently. At least that's what I would tell people. Of course, I'd be in the office daily, just after everyone else had left. I was not going to be a male executive anymore. I was simply going to be a female custodial worker. I decided to tell Lily first. As I told her my plans and congratulated her sarcastically, she gawked at me. She didn't say anything. After about a minute of silence, I asked, "Aren't you going to say anything, Lily?" With a look of befuddlement seemingly plastered on her face, she answered, "Are you serious?" "Yes, Lily. I know the score, don't play cute," I answered. "What in God's name are you talking about, Mr. Sayers?" I shook my head at her response. I figured that just like the domineering women in Head, this girl was crafty. I answered, "You know damn well, Lily. Are you really sure about this? Isn't there somebody more qualified? Come on, Mr. Sawyers, do you really think I can do your job?" Lily asked, practically begging me to reconsider. I was sure it was just part of her game. I answered, "We'll find out. Don't act like you didn't want this." Lily stared blankly at me without any hint of glee. I then went and called for the office's attention. Everyone stopped to look at me. I explained my decision to my shocked subordinates. My selection of Lily to replace me instead of my vice president prompted mutters. I knew then that Lily had kept my secret. I thought that she had played her hand perfectly. Of course, my employees had no idea what she knew, so her selection made no sense to them. They simply couldn't understand why I would skip over Brian for my secretary. Brian seemed concerned about my choice, but I told him that I would listen to his concerns as a board member. I assured Brian that I wouldn't let Lily tank the company. I said that I would intervene if I thought that Lily was going to damage the company. However, I made clear to Brian that I expected him to try to convince her that she was going to make a mistake before he asked me to step in. That was enough to placate him. Besides, given the economy, Brian didn't have too many other places to turn to for employment. There was a brief period of transition in the office, lasting the 2 weeks before I started my new life as solely a cleaning lady. I made a number of arrangements to facilitate the transfer power over the corporation's day-to-day as cleanly as possible. I also trained Lily as best I could before I turned over the company's reins. I thought she was a fairly good pupil even though she seemed hesitant to learn what I was teaching her. It almost seemed to me that she didn't really want the job. At the time, I thought the girl deserved an Oscar for that performance. Then my first day as nothing more than a cleaning lady in that building came. I arrived at the office at 5:30, careful to see that all my employees had left. Only Lily's car was in the lot at the time. I walked in and headed up to my old offices to change into my uniform in the ladies' room. I unlocked the front door and headed up to our offices on the second floor. I turned the knob and entered the office I had once ruled. It was all the same except it was now Lily's dominion. Lily saw me enter the office as she looked up from the executive's chair that had once been my throne in that office. She smiled at me and got back to work as I headed to the bathroom. I had always dressed in my office, so this was a slightly new experience. I went into a stall and stripped down to my underwear and put on my dress and shoes. I walked over to the mirror above the sink and put on my makeup after I put my hair up into a high ponytail. I put my male clothes into the paper bag I carried my female outfit in and headed out into the office. Lily came out of her office as I started vacuuming. I could see she was heading home for the night as she carried her purse and briefcase. We looked more different from one another than ever before. When she had worn her skirt suits before I was in my suits, now, she was still in one of her skirt suits, but I was a uniform dress. Lily smiled at me and said, "Good night, Fran." I replied submissively, "Good night, Ms. Black." She exited the room, and I got back to cleaning. I felt ashamed at my submissiveness at that moment. I couldn't believe what I had let happen to myself. As the first week passed, I grew more bitter about what had happened to me even as I found myself enjoying what I was doing. I couldn't believe that I had let myself be reduced to a cleaning lady. I had ruled that office with something short of an iron fist, but now, I only cleaned up my former employees' mess. I had gone from their boss to the lowest position in the company that I had built. However, despite my anger at what had happened to me, I found myself conflicted because my perversion had made my fall so oddly titillating for me. The next Monday, I again saw Lily leaving late. I grumbled about her as she walked past me. Lily paused as she heard my words. I saw her feet come to a complete stop before she turned and faced me. I glanced up at her and saw her staring at me with a look of concern on her face. She put her hand on my shoulder as I picked up one of her employees' waste paper baskets. I recoiled from her touch. Lily looked genuinely startled by this. She asked, "What's wrong, Fran?" I shook my head and decided that it was time for a final confrontation between us. I nearly shouted, "What's wrong? What do you think is wrong, Lily? Look at me. I'm fucking Fran, the cleaning lady. I'm not who I was anymore. Then why don't you come back, Mr. Sayers? Come back? Like that's an option after what you did to me. You'd never let me be the boss around here. I'd just be your puppet and cleaner. You forced me into this position, so don't pretend to try to throw me a rescue line." Lily gave me a strange look like I was talking gibberish. She shook her head and responded, "You quit your job to take this one." "I didn't tell you to do it." "The hell you didn't. If I didn't do it, you were going to tell everyone what you saw me do." Lily stared at me blankly for a moment before she retorted, "No, I told I wouldn't tell anyone. I don't know why you assumed I would have when I kept telling you I wouldn't." "Really, and why would you keep something this juicy to yourself?" I asked as I pointed to my dress. Lily shook her head and replied, "I would keep it to myself because I liked you as my boss. You were always kind and polite with me. You were a great boss. Not every boss is like that, Mr. Fran. Besides that, I wouldn't risk you firing me, so that's why I didn't tell anyone, and I wouldn't. I need this job. Not the position I'm working now. But I would be in real trouble if you fired me. There was absolutely no reason for you to think I would tell anyone." I was surprised by her answer. Part of me couldn't believe what I was hearing. I replied, "It doesn't matter, Lily. You would have let it slip eventually. Then everyone would know, and I'd be the laughingstock of the office." Lily smiled and said, "Maybe for a few days, but it would pass. What you did really wasn't that much of a problem. I mean, everyone here knows you're gay, so this probably wouldn't be as much of a shock if you were straight." I blushed as she mentioned the implications of my sexuality as I projected it. Maybe she was right. I might have misread the whole thing because I viewed myself as a straight man instead of the gay man my employees thought I was. Looking back on it, I'm sure the girls had caught me looking at them and figured that I was admiring their clothes. They probably guessed I was a cross-dresser already. Some of the men probably guessed it too. It was at that moment that I realized how badly I had misinterpreted everything around me the last few weeks. I had played out a fantasy that had been in my head in real life. I had cast Lily in the role of my dominant feminizing woman, but she really wasn't that. I had simply projected that upon her and acted as if she was that woman instead of the sweet, nice girl she had always been. I finally understood that it was my natural paranoia and submissiveness that had gotten the better of me, but I realized it was for the best. I was doing what I always wanted to do. Now that I realized that it was my own doing, the few negative feelings I had about it seemed to leave me. I was left with nothing but my weary body and the aroused enjoyment I felt as I performed my feminine labors. I was happy to be a cleaning lady. I felt lucky even. It was everything I dreamt it was. I loved being Fran. I loved seeing my womanish reflection in mirrors, metals, and water. I was her. That lowly cleaning woman was who I really was. I couldn't believe how fortunate I was to finally get to live as her. Part of me still can't. Lily broke the silence and asked, "Would you like your old job back?" "There wouldn't be any hard feelings on my part if you took it back. It's rightfully yours anyway." I smiled at Lily and said, "No, that's okay. Thank you anyway." "Are you sure?" Lily replied. I answered, "I'm sure. You were right, Ms. Black. I did this to myself, and I did so because I want this job. I'm sorry for wasting your time with my unimportant concerns. A woman in your position shouldn't have to concern yourself with a woman of mine. If you'll excuse me, I'd like to get back to work, if you'll let me, of course." Lily smiled and said, "Of course, Fran. Don't let me keep you, but don't think that I'm above you either." I smiled and said, "I have to, Ms. Black." She shook her head at me with a smile as she replied, "You're a strange girl, Fran. Have a good night." "Have a good night, Ms. Black," I replied. I walked away from her and got back to cleaning that office. I vacuumed, dusted, mopped and scrubbed clean every surface that I was responsible for. A smile rested on my face the whole night as I performed my lowly, servile tasks. I finished up and went home that night with a tired body and a happy mind.